On episode 157 of the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, we speak to Dr. Brent Lacey, and he's going to teach you how a solid foundation will set you up for success as a leader. That's right, folks. It's peak performance right from the beginning. Are you ready for this? All right, let's do it. Welcome one, welcome all to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, a weekly podcast series dedicated to helping you hit peak performance across the three domains of leadership. Those being leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. This podcast couples my 20 years of military experience as a senior Canadian Army officer with world-class guests to bring you the most complete podcast of leadership going. And for more, feel free to check out our website at movingforwardleadership.com. And with that, let's get to the show. Yes, it's so great to have you here for, the inaugural episode of the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. We have just rebranded the show. Don't worry. The website still stays the same. The company still stays the same. It's just a little tweak in the podcast to make it more aligned with what we're looking to achieve here at the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, which is hitting your peak, right? In those three domains: yourself, your team, and your organization. So today in this inaugural show, we actually bring on an MD doctor, believe it or not, Brent Lacey. But his story and his message actually is in line exactly with what we're trying to achieve here. You see, Brent is all about setting up his fellow physicians for success because he believes that they are leaders as well, right? Because they are. These folks lead their patients, but they also run clinics, they run departments, they go and have hospitals that they're in charge of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the reality is, as a now coach, Brent goes out and teaches other doctors how to be leaders. And he firmly believes that setting a solid foundation is actually the key to success. Why? Because if we don't have a solid foundation, everything else crumbles. If you have issues in your house, your home, wherever you live right now, if the paint's peeling off, it's not a big deal. But if the foundation is, crumbling, then you need to vacate. And that's kind of what we are getting at in today's show. So we talk about how being ahead of a student body actually helps shape his leadership style, the leadership lessons he learned during his military service, how to build those high-performing teams from that foundation aspect, how leading in the medical field is actually different than other fields, but the lessons he has learned to bring it forth to you, the leader. This is a super interesting show, very different, not one that we've had here on the podcast before. So I am happy to bring this to you today. All right, that is it for me. Are you ready for this? Why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my interview with Dr. Brent Lacey all about how setting a foundation for leadership success. So I was on your show and I was the first international guest. And ironically, for a guy who is actually married to a physician, you are the first physician guest on the podcast. So congratulations to you.
Hey, all right. Breaking some barriers there.
Break them down. So one thing I like to do with my guests is get them to, give a quick background about themselves, who they are, how they got to where they are today, a bit about your story. Maybe if you got some kind of fun, random fact, throw it in there for fun. Why not? So let's start off there. Let's dive. And after that, we'll dive into the meat of the interview.
Yeah, sure. So I went to medical school in San Antonio, Texas, and then joined the Navy and went off to become a Navy physician. And so I did all my internal medicine residency training and my gastroenterology training through the Navy. And then I was a Navy physician for 11 years, and then decided to get out and join a private practice in Dallas, Texas, which is where I'm from, which has been just awesome. I mean, it was hard to leave the military, of course, and I certainly miss all my friends and all the camaraderie and everything. As an Army officer, I mean, you know how that is. I mean, there's an esprit de corps that it's hard to find elsewhere. But you know, it's where I grew up, and we've got family here, so it's just been amazing to get back. And you know, my kids and my brother and sister's kids are, you know, about the same age, and so they're all going to get to grow up together with their cousins, which will be fun. And you know, I started you know, I started doing some financial coaching about 5 or 6 years ago with my church. You know, just you know, coaching folks on, you know, how to run a budget, and you know, just doing simple stuff like helping people get out of debt, and just as a ministry thing. And then started getting asked to do that at my hospital, and I realized that there's a huge need in the healthcare community for some good coaching on how to master your personal finances. And you know, there's a number of folks that are kind of speaking into that space, but one of the things that I found that was really missing, I think, at least in the online, you know, blogosphere and the podcasting space, is any discussion of like healthcare leadership. There's plenty of people that talk about, you know, burnout and mental fitness and, you know, personal finance and things like that. But there's not a lot of people talking about leadership for physicians and dentists and nurse practitioners. It's just not something we talk about. And, you know, being married to a doctor, I'm sure your wife didn't get any training on that in med school. I know I sure didn't. So fortunately for me, I had the benefit of doing a lot of leadership stuff when I was in college. I was really heavily involved in our student union, and my senior year, I actually got to be the chief operating officer of the entire student union. So I had 1,800 students that were working with me, and we produced something like 1,500 or 2,000 programs that year. We had a budget of about $6 million, and I was responsible for all of that. Which was awesome. It was a phenomenal experience. And, you know, the thing I realized is that, you know, coming out of training, physicians are great at being doctors, but they're really lousy at everything else to do with doctoring, with, you know, leadership and with mastering your personal finances. And so, you know, I started a blog and a podcast called The Scope of Practice to try to coach people through that, which has just been just a huge blessing and really a great opportunity to get to talk to some folks, which is, I've really enjoyed that a lot. And you asked for a fun fact. I'll give you my fun fact. So, you know, most physicians are, I guess the stereotype is that, you know, you're good golfers, you know, got a super low handicap. And I have not played golf hardly ever, but I do consider myself a connoisseur of miniature golf. I've played 87 courses of miniature golf across the world.
That's awesome. I like a good game of miniature golf myself. I probably haven't played on 87 courses, but funny about golf, I don't play much golf myself. But the last time I did, I was picked the tee off, and as I swung and hit the ball, my club snapped. The head snapped off my club. It went flying into this large oak tree. On the other side of the oak tree was the putting practice area, and it was Senior Ladies Day at that course, and it was about 15 old ladies at the putting range. So thank God for that big oak tree that the club hit, because if not, I probably would have sent one of those ladies to see you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I was going to say that's probably how a round of golf would go for me. Like, yeah, I couldn't find my way out of a sand trap with a rake and a shovel, but you put me in front of a windmill and I'm like Tiger Woods.
Yeah. So anyways, with a couple camping buddies, so that head turned into a trophy. But nonetheless, we are here to talk about real leadership, not those who think golf is leadership. But I want to go back to that student union gig you were talking about. And what lessons did you learn from that time in, you know, overseeing 1,800 people, $6 million? You know, what type of style, you know, you must have had to employ a variety of styles of leadership there, because especially in a student body, you have all kinds of different people who respond to different things. So what were your lessons from those days?
Golly, just so many. It's hard to know where to start. But I think one was the value of leaning on people who have experience. You know, mentorship, I think, was huge, because the way that we worked our student union, it was we called it a student staff partnership. So there were people who were on the permanent staff there that we're actually educators and, administrators. And so, they were there year to year. They had a lot of institutional knowledge. They had a lot of experience, and they would kind of coach us, but they would let the students, lead. It was kind of a leadership laboratory. And so really leaning heavily on those mentors to know, like, well, what kinds of things have worked in the past, or, are we about to make a mistake of epic proportions that you guys have seen made in the past that we need to avoid, and that kind of thing. And really listening to some of the voices of experience. I think that was one big thing. The second thing I think was really critical for me was learning the value of culture. And so, I've listened to a lot of leadership podcasts over the years. I've read a lot of leadership books, and I really believe that when it comes to business strategy, you can have all the strategies that you want, but if you don't have a good team culture, you are doomed. I mean, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if you have a good team culture where everybody feels comfortable speaking their mind, and everybody wants to innovate, and everybody's excited to bring their ideas, and everybody wants to see the team succeed more than they want their own name to be in the lights, then you've got a recipe for greatness. And so that was one of the things I think was really important for me, is recognizing how to empower other people. And so instead of me having a monopoly on all the good ideas, trying to make it so that I could see that my team members would succeed, put them forward and showcase their great ideas and highlight how important they were and how valuable they were. And doing that was a way to amplify my own contributions. Because, the thing that I like to say is that, human beings can be brilliant, but you can only come up with one brilliant idea at a time. Whereas if you have a team and you amplify, the 5 members of your team, you can come up with 5 brilliant ideas at a time. It's a 500% increase in brilliance immediately if you just focus on making everybody else better. And I think that was really key. And I think the third big lesson that I would say is the value of starting small. I think a lot of times people see, certain leadership positions and they go, oh, I definitely want to do that. And, I know one of your big taglines is lead, don't boss. And I feel like a lot of people fall into this trap of, seeing the title and seeing the, the prestige and the perks and whatever. And let me tell you what, there ain't no front row parking space that is worth the mantle of leadership. It's just not worth it. I mean, the perks are just not valuable enough. If you're going to be a leader, you need to do it for the right reasons. And I think it is valuable to start small. And so, start as a member of a team, learn how your organizational structure works, learn some interpersonal dynamics, learn how to influence people, learn how to work as a member of a team, how to achieve a common goal, learn how to manage, learn how to delegate, and start picking up some of those little skills. And then each step you take is getting you closer and closer to that, to that next role, into that next role, into that next role. But don't feel like you need to leap into, the top position right away, or ever into the top position necessarily. Go for what's the next step. What is the next right move for you?
Love it. Especially love culture. We talk a lot about culture here at Moving Forward Leadership, and you're right. Culture just eats strategy for breakfast, because if you don't have the right organizational culture, your team's just going to fall apart. There's some great examples out there. Uber, hello. What a counterpeg disaster that was. Why? Because of culture, and what that the senior leadership team there enabled within the company, and so many different levels. And I also like the bit about starting small and working towards. I am a huge fan of that 1% ideology of 1% improvement per day, right? And if you start off at 1% and use the financial metaphor here, start off with 1%, $1, and you increase that by 1% every compounded daily, you end up with $34 and change. I forget exactly the number here, but you just think like that's over 340% in net increase. Who wouldn't want to take that return? I mean, you'd be crazy not to, no matter what. Where you're investing it. So that those small incremental improvements get often not enough praise for what they actually are. Too many people go for the big hits, the big runs, and dive in like, oh, I gotta be the leader, I gotta be a CEO and all this stuff. Well, you know what? Have you led a section of like a small team of 4 people yet? Do you even know the trials and tribulations that go about managing and juggling schedules and worrying about other people's families? Because that's what it takes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember reading reading a story one time. I I can't remember if it was a grocery store chain or if it was Walmart. I want to say it was a big famous grocery store chain, but as the story goes, there was the son of a huge businessman, very, very successful businessman, had this huge chain of some kind of a store. I think it was a grocery store. And, this kid wanted to go to work for his dad, of course. Right. And he's thinking, yeah, I'm going to go and be in the boardroom. I'm going to be super fancy. And his dad said, nope, you want to work for me? You start where everybody else starts. You start offloading the trucks at 4 a.m. And so he's, here he is, the son of the CEO, and he is offloading the produce from the warehouse trucks at 4 a.m. And he did that for a while. And then he had to learn how to bag groceries for a while. And then he had to learn how to, run the deli counter for a while. And then eventually he gets up to assistant manager. It took him years to go up. And I was listening to this podcast where he was talking about how valuable those years of learning and working and taking those incremental steps were to his ultimate success. And he said if he hadn't had that foundation, it would have been just incredibly difficult to make the right decisions when he was the top boss. And I think it's the same phenomenon that happens to folks that win the lottery. If you suddenly come into a tremendous amount of money and you haven't built up the discipline over years of working and saving and understanding the value of compound interest and making these smart choices one day at a time, then you get this huge amount of money and you don't know how to be responsible with it. You don't know what to do. And so I think taking those incremental steps towards your next leadership role is really crucial.
So I really like this direction we're going in with this show, setting the foundation and making these small incremental steps. So let's talk about your next incremental step in your career, in your leadership journey. So you're head of student union and you decide to join the Navy and go through all your medical training in the U.S. Navy and serve in the U.S. Navy. So what were the leadership lessons you took from your time at the head of the student body there, student union, and 2, how did you apply them? And then finally, what else did you learn through your military service that you eventually would carry on forward in your career?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I think the experience translated quite naturally. So I think one of the big things was part of it being part of a team. When you start out in your medical training, you're immediately you're immediately part of a team. So, let's say, for example, so I'm an internal medicine specialist and, so you're on your internal medicine rounds at the hospital where there's a senior physician who's in charge of everybody. And then there's a mid-level trainee who's a couple years ahead of you, and then a bunch of brand new trainees and maybe a med student or two. And, everybody's there working together and you're learning from each other. And some people have more expertise. Some people have less. Some people have, different kinds of backgrounds and maybe certain kinds of clinical training or maybe research, but everybody's suddenly doing the same job. And you realize that, you don't know as much as the next person in some cases. In some cases, more. And so you kind of have to lean on each other for mutual support. And one of the things I think was really important and I think it was really helpful in terms of my experience in the student union was, and you and I talked about this on my show, was the idea of humility, of recognizing your own limitations and when it's time to ask for help. I mean, so if you walk in, you got this big ego and you're like, yeah, I'm a big bad doctor. I know my stuff. I'm a superstar. I was top of my class, this and that. And, you walk in and, you get to a point where you're like, I really don't know the answer here. I don't know what to do. If you don't have that check on your ego to say, I need to ask for help, you could really end up hurting somebody because you're just too stubborn or too prideful to just, stop what you're doing and just ask for help. And so I think learning to be part of a team was one of the biggest things that I definitely learned. And I think the second big thing was the idea of, I guess, being too stubborn to fail. And just, the idea that, not coming from a sense of arrogance, but just from a sense of purpose and, mission orientation that, hey, this is so important that there are so many people counting on me. The stakes are so high that it is unacceptable for me to reach a place of failure. So if I run into a roadblock, I don't quit and give up. I got to find a way around it. And if that means asking a mentor, if that means asking a peer, if that means, learning something, reading something, just, finding the answer somewhere, then that's what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to out hustle everybody until I'm the one that has all the answers, or I'm the one that can empower people to get the answers. But I'm not going to just accept that there are limitations, because if there are, I'm going to find a way around them, or I'm going to find somebody else who can help me get around them.
It's tough being alone as a leader. You're often in situations where you're not sure where to go. You're not sure what's the best decision. Yet, as Colin Powell once said, it's lonely at the top. And reality is, it takes time. Sure, you can read books and listen to podcasts such as this one, but nothing beats experience. But who has time for experience when you're at a situation right now that requires experience to lead yourself, your team, your organization through? That's where coaching comes in. You see, coaching enables you to unlock the experience in others. Right here, right now, you have 20 years of military service, plus 150 plus episodes of interviews and topics and research sitting at your disposal. So what are you waiting for? Are you ready to level up your game, become that leader that you know you're meant to be? Are you ready to go to the next level? If so, drop me a line, scott@movingforwardleadership.com, or swing by the website and book a discovery call through movingforwardleadership.com/book. And let's get you moving in the right direction, leading better, leading more effectively today, right here, right now. Starting off with leading yourself. And then let's focus on how you can build your high-performing team to drive your organization's output higher, faster, harder today. Not next week, not next month, but today. All right, folks, that's it. Now let's get back to the show. I really like that last bit. I speak regularly about the basically, accepting the mediocrity. Oh, it's good enough. Oh, it won't happen again. Yeah, we can accept those crappy results. We'll just do better next time. Or yeah, I could show up late and that's fine because I'm the boss and no one can say anything. All of these types of mediocrity just drive me nuts. And not having a plan, not accepting lesser results than what you could have gotten, accepting basically poor performance from your people and not addressing it, accepting poor discipline from your folks and not addressing it. These are all mediocrities that just drive me nuts, and it's not good leadership. I took command of a squadron of 200, and right away people were talking to me about one particular employee. Oh, he's just not doing his job. Okay, great. Has anyone ever told him he's not doing his job? No. Well, then how the heck do you expect him to know that he's not doing his job? As far as he's concerned, life is great. He's being told he's doing a great job despite to his face. Yet when you come in my office and you talk about this individual, you tell me he's not doing his job. Go out there and tell him he's not doing his job. Point simple. And explain to him why he's not doing his job and what's lacking. And if there's tools missing in his toolbox, find ways to get the toolbox filled. And that's what I'm talking about, this mediocrity of people just accepting like, oh, this is just how it is. Well, no, it's not. So I really like that point.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of breaking past normal. I think normal is lame. I think normal is boring. I think normal is average. And, I would rather have exceptional. I would rather have stupendous. I would rather have outstanding. And so, in my practice, everybody that's on my team, it would be like the superstar of any other clinic they would walk into, because we just don't keep people who aren't bringing it every day, who aren't hungry, who aren't looking for 5% better all the time. And, in our line of work, when it comes to, hospital work and, like as a gastroenterologist, I see people that are, bleeding to death from time to time. And, if we have a bad day, and somebody dies, that's just not good enough. And so this idea of sanctioned mediocrity, I'm with you, is just, it is a real problem. This reversion to the mean may work in some industries and it may be just okay. But man, you have a life and death situation, like you face in the Army, or like I used to face in the Navy, or like I face in the hospital, and it's just not going to be good enough. And let's say you're not in a life and death situation. Let's say you run into a black swan event like COVID, and your business is just okay, and then you have this huge event that just crushes everybody, except for the people that are bringing it every day, that are exceptional, and they're the ones that are going to survive, and you're going to be left out in the cold. So, if you accept mediocrity, that's the best you're ever going to get. And if that's the ceiling, then your average is going to be even below that.
Love it. We are very much minds alike here. So now, you're out of the Navy, you're running your own practice. You literally have lives on the line. Medical teams work obviously very tight together. And you as the attending physician, you're at the head of those teams. So what I'd love to hear about is, how do you, as the head physician of your team, go about building that team? How do you go about ensuring that everyone is on board with your vision? Everyone is on board. Everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing. How do you go about building that team up to a high performing level? Because by the sounds of it, you definitely have that going within your company.
Yeah, I think it starts with conversations that have exceptional clarity. Because I think to your point you were making earlier, the fellow that was, not getting the job done and no one ever bothered to tell him, that's leadership's fault. That's not his fault, right? So he's not bringing it, but maybe he didn't get the chance. And so, for us, when I'm, when we're managing the team, we may have a different group of people working with us every day, depending on who's on shift or whatever. And, at the beginning of every new group of folks, I sit down and have a very specific conversation with everybody, or anytime we hire somebody new, I would sit down with them and we have a very frank, very specific conversation. And it goes something like this. So, Joe, Karen, we're super excited to have you on the team. You're going to be great. We're super excited to help you, to make you the best. But what you need to realize is that you're joining an elite team here. We do not settle for second place. So we have no interest in silver medals here. So if you're bringing your A game every day, if you're coming into work pumped up and ready to help the patients and ready to help your teammates, man, you're going to have an awesome experience here. And if that's, not really your thing, and you're, just kind of looking for a place to coast and looking for a place to, punch the clock, you come in at 7:59 and you leave at 5:01 every day. And, that's just kind of the way it is for you. You're probably not going to enjoy it here, because, we are go-getters. We are motivated. We do better than everybody else. And we really pride ourselves on being the best. And so if you're ready to be part of an elite team, we are ready to have you. And then I tell them two things. I say two big things I always want people to know whenever they're joining my team. Rule number one is you come to work with your brain engaged. So everybody's got to have their brain switched on. You're not thinking about, stuff that you were doing this weekend. You're not thinking about, this movie that you're going to see tonight or whatever. We can talk about that kind of stuff, and that's all fun and games. But at the end of the day, we've got to be making sure that we're taking care of our patients. And so as long as you're keeping your patients in the forefront of your mind all the time, you're going to do just fine. I said, and the second thing is, don't ever, ever let me hear the phrase from you, "That's not my job." Like, those 4 words are my least favorite 4 words to hear in sequence anywhere. That's not my job. Said, your job is taking care of patients and your job is helping your team do that. And so if you come across a question from somebody that it genuinely isn't your role, the answer is, that's not something that I can really help you with, but I know who can, or I'm not sure where to get the answer to that, but we're going to figure that out together. Let me see if I can help you. Okay. So always looking for ways to help, always looking for ways to make the team better, always looking for ways to help everybody get the job done together.
Love it. Actually, it reminds me, I had a former U.S. Navy SEAL commander, Mark Devine, on the show, and I asked him that question.
Yeah, just recently. Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, good old Mark. Actually, the recent one was the second time he's been on the show. And I asked him that question, and he basically said this is very similar things, right? Setting a standard. In the SEALs, obviously, there is no room for mediocrity. That's kind of what you got at the first part there of, you show up, you continuously improve, you continuously bring your A game, the best you got that day. Whatever it is that day, you bring that. Maybe it's not as good as what it was yesterday, but it'll be better than what it was tomorrow type thing. And you bring whatever you got. And the second thing is, as you said at the end there, of being able to lean on each other, being able to know that no matter what, I got you. You got a bad day, I got you. You need me to take some files off your hands? No worries, I got you. I'm doing 110 today. No big deal. You go ahead, you coast at 80 because something's going on. No big deal. But next time it's going to be reversed. And you don't need to say anything because you're looking at me going, you know what? Today I got you. You take a knee today. So it's very similar things for sure. And I love it. And so in the medical world, like we look at you doctors, often people look at you as leaders and other people look at you as, you're physicians, you do what it is. How is leading in a medical context different than, in business or in government or in a school or anything like that? Or is it actually different?
I've worked in a number of different fields, and I think that all leadership roles have some commonalities. But I think one of the big ways in which, two big ways I can think of that medical leadership is different. One is that you are a leader by virtue of your position, regardless of experience level. And that's a little bit unusual in most industries, especially in most, companies, most business organizations. You're typically going to be a leader after a certain number of years of experience, demonstrated previous leadership roles in smaller teams and that sort of thing. And so you kind of have this natural stepping stone or this natural ladder, as it were, for getting up into the higher echelons of leadership. But as a physician, you come out of medical school and on day one, you've got nurses looking to you for orders on what medications to give the patients and, what treatments to provide and when to call you for help and support, on medical school plus 1 day, you are not qualified to do that. I mean, that is the simple fact. And yet you have people that are looking for you. Now, you got a team that's backing you up. And so you've got people you can lean on and ask for help. And you're not the ultimate, authority, but you are sort of thrust into this leadership role very quickly. So I remember my very first day on call as an intern. So for your listeners, the natural path to being a doctor is you go to college for 4 years, you go to medical school for 4 years, then you do a kind of extended apprenticeship for anywhere from 3 to 7 years, depending on what specialty you're going into. And the first year that we call your internship. And then after that, we call it residency. So my first day of my internship, I'm on call in the intensive care unit. I mean, I am literally 1 day out of medical school and I have the absolute hardest job in the hospital. I'm on call for 30 hours straight in the intensive care unit. And, I got nurses coming to me with legitimately life and death questions. And, you talk about a feeling of overwhelm. And I remember calling my parents later that evening, like, hey, how's your first day? I'm like, I'm so stupid. I don't know anything. It was painful. But I think that is one of the things that is really different. And so the degree to which you really are forced to lean on other people and to trust others. And that is a big shock for folks, because I think most of us, go into medical school as really ambitious, high achievers. Most people were, very academically inclined. They have, high marks on tests. They're really gifted academically. They have, extended, involvement in extracurricular activities. A lot of them have really substantial leadership roles. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh man, you are way out of your depth and you're not used to that. And so I think having that gut check of humility is really challenging for folks. And then I think when you get into practice, the other thing that's really different is, as physicians, we tend to work in silos a little bit. So in my practice, we've got, 10 doctors that are all in the same office, and, I see them all every day, but, for the most part, we each kind of do our own thing. Right. So, I'm seeing 15 patients or whatever. And, my partners are each seeing 15 patients, or however many they're seeing. And, I see my first one, and then I talk to the nurses, and I go see my second one. And I go talk to the nurses, and, I'm kind of doing my own thing. So it's very easy, I think, to get, to just kind of have your blinders on and to think, well, I'm doing everything right because nobody's saying anything to me. And so if you're not constantly looking for that, like you talked about with moving forward, right? Where if you're not constantly learning and constantly trying to make yourself better and asking other people, hey, what would you do in this situation? Or, hey, I've got this thing I'm not really sure how to handle. What do you think? And you kind of lean on each other and force yourself out of your own box and keep adapting and keep improving. I think you can easily end up in a sort of a stagnation situation where you're just never improving. So you kind of have to force yourself into that mode of continual improvement.
I love it. Especially love that story about being on call for the first time. Kind of brings me back to showing up to my first unit for the first day and walking in a room. And there were 4 warrant officers there. Warrant officer is a pretty senior non-commissioned rank up here in the Canadian Army. And the guy that would eventually, we kind of followed each other. He for a while there at the beginning of my career. Vance, I remember Vance looking at me and going, "Hey, sir, how old are you?" I'm like, 23. And just like as you said about medical students, same thing for me. Just fresh out of Royal Military College, full of piss and vinegar, high achiever, ready to do this. Let's go. And he's like, "Oh, 23 years old." He's like, he looks at the other 3. He's like, "How many years you guys got in?" Like 28, 26, 23. And he's like, "Yeah, I got 25. And right away he's like, "And I'm put in my place. These folks have more years of experience than I have of life." And, but they were an invaluable resource, right? Because I was the one like you. They were coming to me and like, "All right, this is a situation. What do you want to do?" Like, "Oh, what do you recommend? Have you seen this before?" And then they start giving you advice, and the stories come out. But at the end of the day, it's still your decision. It's still your call in which way you go. And you just
as that junior officer, you got to have, the smarts as well as the humility to say, okay, absolutely, I need to let these guys coach me a little bit, because you can take the position like, hey, they have to salute me. I'm more senior than them. But if you're a junior lieutenant and you're not listening to your master sergeant with 25 years experience, you are going to have some problems.
Absolutely. Oh, Brett, man, this conversation flew by. I didn't even realize. And here we are. It just seems to happen with us. We start winding down here. But before we wrap up, I do got a couple last questions for you. One being a question I ask all the guests here moving forward leadership. And that is, from you, Brent, Lacey, what makes a great leader?
Well, I think a great leader is someone who will make sure that they are taking everything seriously, even if they don't think that it is necessarily going to jumpstart their career or be, the next stepping stone. They're just taking care of business because it's what needs to be done. And I'll tell you, as someone who hires leaders and as someone who coaches leaders and trains leaders, I go back to, as a Christian, I go back to the parable of the talents from the Bible, was where it says, if you can be trusted with a little, then you can be trusted with a lot. And so I'm always interested in seeing, if I give someone a job, or if I have someone that's doing a task or in a role and it's fairly small, if I don't see that they can do a really outstanding job at that, why would I ever trust them with more? So if you're interested in being a leader, lead where you are. For ways to boost your team members, find a way to get the job done. Show me that you can do the job that you're in, and then I'll consider you for more. Because I'm always looking out for people that are just crushing it, that are bringing their A game. And if you only bring just the average, you're going to make my job very easy. Because I'm looking for the superstars, and the superstars are going to shine, and you're not. And if that's where you want to be, you're not going to be part of my team. So if you want to be a leader, bring your A game wherever you are, and people will notice. People will take action on that.
Awesome, man. Love it. Absolutely love it. Final question is, how can people find you? How can they follow you, be part of your journey? I know you got your website, you got a podcast. What other resources you got going on for physicians who may be listening?
Yeah, the website's a great place to get started. It's thescopeofpractice.com. And you can find links to my podcast there and the blog, and it's all free content. And so we're gonna have Scott on the podcast here pretty soon, so look out for that. I'm really pumped about that. It was an awesome episode. But thescopeofpractice.com, and if people want to go to thescopeofpractice.com/moving forward, I've got a little giveaway for folks. It's a PDF guide that I created called 32 Ways to Celebrate Your Team Members, because like I said, a lot of the value of leadership, a lot of the effects of leadership come from boosting your team members and making them better. So people can download that for free. It's a little gift for your listeners. It's thescopeofpractice.com/moving forward.
Hey, for you, the listener, it's easy as always. Just go to movingforwardleadership.com/157. Links are in show notes for you all. Brent, my man, thanks for coming out. Thanks for talking to me. And most importantly, thanks for talking to the audience member.
Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
And that's a wrap for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. But you know what you could do to truly support the podcast? And no, that's not leaving a rating and review. It's simply helping a friend. And that is helping a friend by sharing this episode with them if you think this would resonate with them and help them elevate their performance level, whether that's within themselves, their teams, or their organization. So do that. Help me, help a friend, win-win all around. And hey, you look like a great friend at the same time. So just hit that little share button on your app, and then feel free to fire this episode to anyone that you feel would benefit from it. Finally, there's always more. There's always more lessons around being the highest performing leader that you can possibly be, whether that's for yourself, your team, or your organization. So why don't you subscribe? Subscribe to the show via movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And until next time, lead, don't boss, and thanks for coming out. Take care now.